point. There's no difference to how you build a B2B business or a B2C business or a consumer-to-consumer business or all business has a very basic set of rules. You have a set of customers who express a need and are willing to pay a price for that need to be fulfilled. And as a company, you've got to figure out how you meet that need, whether it's producing a pair of shoes, figuring out how to give them a menu from which they can order, or whether you provide a transportation service. At a certain level of abstraction, it makes no difference. The only difference between consumers and businesses is that businesses typically, and to start with at the surface, have a better articulated set of needs than consumers do. Business as delivery, for instance, I understand the pain points of our business completely. Like for instance, payroll is a big headache for us. So it's pretty easy for a company which wants to do payroll management to come to us and say, I know exactly how to manage payroll for 15,000 employees, come and serve this to us. What we did was to get our customers and to get them to co-develop with us. B2C companies typically don't start that way. They start with an idea. Right? Uber starts because Travis Kalanick and his friends have a night out on town and then they can't find a cab back, and Travis thinks what a great idea it is if I have an app which can get me a car. Right? Zomato starts because the guys there think we can't order food. It's a great idea if I could find every restaurant. So in that sense, they think of themselves as consumers and then build the product out from there. Right? In a B2B environment, the advantage is you can go and talk to 10 potential customers and say, all right, what's your problem? What's your problem? What's yours? Each of them then expresses a relatively similar sort of need. And then you have the ability to combine all of those into the minimum viable product. So that, for instance, when we started, we discovered there were 3 elements in the value proposition that mattered to everybody. Speed, which is how fast will you deliver to my customer. Second was visibility. Can I see exactly where every order is? Can my customer see exactly where every order is? And the third on top of that was, can you handle my cash very well? So we started out with a simple 3-pronged value proposition, which was common to every single one of our customers. It's not to say they didn't have other unexpressed needs, they did. But this was the basic, minimum, common sort of set of needs that they articulated. Which is where B2B and B2C become slightly different. You can use your customers as reliable partners. You can't use your customers as very reliable partners in a B2C environment because there's too much noise in the data. If you go back 8 years when Meru Cabs was large and you went to every single customer in the country and said, well, how should I think of designing a cab service? Nobody would have come with Uber. Right? Whereas in the B2B environment, what you can do is to sort of start with the minimum viable product, get it going, enter your customer, and then as you sort of understand more about the challenges they face in more detail, then you build on add-on services. So we started warehousing 2 years after we started transportation. A year and a half after that, we started LTL. So what happens is your customer's business starts influencing the growth and scale of your business. It starts influencing the product decisions you take. B2C also, after a while, starts becoming similar, but you also have to make larger leaps of faith in some ways. You think of yourself as a customer and then start. That's the major difference between B2B and B2C. But otherwise, the only other difference is the sales cycles. Right? B2C is more about marketing. B2B is more about sales in some ways. Right? So you have to build a brand in a B2C business, whereas in a B2B business, it's a question of getting the service right again and again and again and again and again and again. And then you have a sales cycle. So you say, I'll go and meet 10,000 potential customers. I'll convert 50% of them into good leads. 10% of them will then start working with me, and they have typically a longer sales cycle depending on the service you sell. Well, the first one was we realized that we needed to increase the speed of cash processing. So to give you a sense, when we started the business, our competitors used to take 30 days to return cash to the shipper, which meant if you were a COD run e-commerce business, you would first of all acquire stock for which you would pay, typically at that point if you were a small e-commerce company, in advance. Then it would take you 30 to 45 days to liquidate the stock, then 7 days of shipping, then 30 days of cashback. Right? So it take you nearly, your working capital cycle was 2.5 months. So we said, look, we can't influence the first part. We can certainly influence the other two. So drop the 7-day shipping to 1 day and drop the 30-day reconciliation cycle to 2 days. Right? Why we picked 2 days was we said, in the long run, for this to be a neutral service to payment gateway, an online payment gateway, you have to match the online payment gateway in terms of both cost and speed. An online gateway will typically take 48 to 72 hours to return capital to your business. So we said we have to design offline the same way. What we did was to make sure when orders were being delivered, they were all being electronically tracked. It was step one. It sounds like it was the easiest thing to do. It was not very hard to do for us, but it is hard to do across an entire network. So it was, that's why the existing guys weren't able to do it as well. So our guys had smartphones. Every time they actually went out and delivered an order, they would mark it. We knew at our back end, and we would already start the payment gateway calculations, which is we've received the COD, what percentage of that is ours, what percentage of that goes back to the e-commerce company. All of that was getting tracked in real time. Then we basically started building the systems which would expose that information in real time back to the e-commerce company, right? So essentially we built the database first. We built our own calculations on top of that. Then we started giving that back to them via APIs, saying integrating into their finance systems, saying this is the cash that's due to you from delivery. And then it was a very simple process. It was an operational process. The cash comes into the branch, you go to a bank branch, deposit it in the currency chest. That's there in your account at the end of day. You reconcile it the next day in the morning and ship it back, transfer the cash electronically to your customers. So it became a seamless process. What we did learn, the only interesting thing we learned, two things. One is when we started, both are operational. One is when we started, we used to reconcile only cash. And we used to be worried about the fact that somebody might run away with the capital. We discovered that almost never happens. People never run away with your cash. What they do is they run away with your inventory. So we discovered that you could not do just a cash audit. You had to do a cash plus inventory audit. So what we did very quickly after the first couple of phones went missing was to institute every day across every one of our branches a complete inventory cycle plus cash audit. So our branches have to close both, which means either they have the cash or they scan the airway bill, which is the unique tracking ID. If both of those don't happen, you know something is wrong. Because let's say he says, well, yes, I have the cash, but I forgot to scan 3 waybills. Chances are he's delivered those, taken the cash himself, and said that these 3 waybills aren't there, right? So those kinds of things we discovered later. The second thing we discovered was the time cycle with which you manage the cash. So we discovered that what guys would do is, and this is actually quite interesting, we would tell them, ki, Acha, theek hai, you collected 1 lakh yesterday in this branch, and it was 8 p.m. by the time you got the cash, so you couldn't go and deposit it in the bank, you're depositing it tomorrow. What this guy would very neatly do in the beginning was in the morning quickly send out 3-4 riders. They would go and deliver, let's say, another 15,000 rupees worth. Take 15,000 and put it in his pocket out of the previous day's 1 lakh. Add this 15,000 into that and deposit the 1 lakh. So he was rolling the cash. As long as the guy did it where it was a very small percentage of the total, it was difficult to catch. Eventually, they all used to get caught because what they would do is get ambitious with this program. And then they would get caught. It used to start off by saying, let me steal 5,000 out of 10 lakhs. Then it used to become, the guy gets used to it. He says, chalo, tomorrow 10,000, then 15, then 20. Again, what we started doing to stop rolling was most of those branches, we essentially did 2 things. One is we got CMS. So we got the banks to collect from our centers at 9 in the morning and 8 in the night. So it became impossible for our guys to roll the cash. The guys who wanted to, they realized that this is impossible. And in all of the other locations, what we started doing was wherever our branch was very far away from a bank branch, we trained our algos. So what we do is every one of our banking partners, Kotak, ICICI, all these guys, provide us a real-time stream of each one of their banking locations, the GPS coordinates of each of them, opening and closing hours, all of that. That gets fed into our routing algos, which actually design the whole network. So when we are placing a distribution center, deciding where to start one of the factors it chooses is distance from the nearest banking partner. So typically, if you go to a delivery branch, we are in the same complex as a bank branch, or we are right across it from the road. The happy, positive externality of that is we also spend less on security because we realize that the bank has security of its own and we just piggyback on their security guard. So it's more operational than it is anything else. That's a great question. That's actually what we did was for the first 18 months. It's very interesting. So when we started delivery, if you go back to the news articles from 2011, 5 other companies started with us 3 months later. So there was a company called Chotu.com, there was one called India on Time, there was one by Express or something, and 2 others. Very simply put, we did not have the capital to go pan-India. We had only our savings, and we'd already, like I said, blown 40% of that on vehicles that we didn't need. We decided that we would understand the unit of our business perfectly. And we realized that the unit of our business was one distribution center. If we could get one distribution center perfect and make it operate exactly the way we wanted at full efficiency with full service quality, then it was simply a question of taking whatever you learned with that one unit and just doing it a million times and getting it right. So we actually started our first city. We started our first DC in Gurgaon in June of 2011. We started our next DC in April the following year. So it took us nearly 12 months to actually set up our next DC because we just kept doing it in Gurgaon day after day after day after day after day. So we started out in June by doing 35 orders per day, if I remember, on the first day in our Gurgaon DC. Nearly 12 months later, we were doing only 300 odd orders a day. But we said we're going to keep perfecting this. Now the advantage that's helped us with in the long run is our first DC took us 12 months to build. Our second DC took us 2 months to build. Today DC takes us anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to build. So we're much faster. So as a company, last year, I'll give you an example. We went, at the same time last year, we were in 3,200 pin codes. This year, same time, 6,800. By December end, we'll be in 8,500. What that does, our competitors are simply unable to understand how we're expanding at this speed. Because the only reason we can do it is because that DC is fully codified. We know exactly what to do. To the point where I know, where is the table going to be? Where's the switchboard? What power backup do I need? It's codified down to that level. To who is the guy, where will he sit, how will he operate, when will the cash come in, what are the localities around it, how many riders, which routes. All of that is system driven now. So we actually started very small, stayed very small for a very long time. And our market share numbers show that. 2 years back at this time, we were 8% of the market. Last year, we were 14.5% of the market. This year, we're 22% of the market. Right? That's coming from the fact that we stayed very small for the first 2-3 years. I genuinely think that's the right approach, always.